Well, hi, it's Marcus, and welcome to another Zooming with. We are talking all the way to California today, where I'm going to be speaking to Brandon Saller from the great band, the mega band. They're huge. They're coming to Australia very soon. They are Akreyu. Brandon, how are you today?
I'm doing very well. How about yourself?
Yeah, not too bad at all, thank you. You are about to kick off your Australian tour. You have not been here since just before COVID hits the world.
Yeah,
You're coming and you are coming to Adelaide. Are you excited about getting the tour happening again?
absolutely. I feel like Australia is the place that we always miss the most. So 4 years has been way, way too long for us to be away. So we're excited. That was literally like when the world started opening up and we started booking tours again. That was like number one was okay, when we go back to Australia. It took us a minute to get there, but we're so excited. We literally were in Perth, I think, and watching the news in the airport, and it was like, oh, like first case of COVID touched down in Melbourne, and Sydney has 13 cases, and we're like, oh fuck, glad we're getting out of here. Not just ignorant to the fact that the whole world will be completely affected.
Yeah, it was just madness. But let's not talk about that. Let's talk about the
Yeah,
days, which is right now. I'm so excited to get you over here. You are playing at the Lion Arts Factory, which is an incredible venue. Did you play there last time?
I
Can't
don't
remember.
know if we played there before or not. I can't remember, but we've never had a bad time in Adelaide, so I don't care where we play.
Oh, it's incredible. You're going to be here on Sunday, the 18th of February. So everyone watching, make sure you pull a sickie from work on that Monday because you're going to need it because this show is going to be big
Absolutely.
and banging. Now, hey, let's go back to the beginning. You've done 13 albums since 2002's Suicide Notes, blah, blah. Incredible. Back in 1998, when you guys all formed in California, who were you all listening to? What really inspired your sound back then?
I think it's funny because I think we were all listening to such different stuff. I think that's why we ended up kind of being sort of an eclectic mix of things from the beginning. I feel like myself and Dan, our guitar player, were really into kind of like what was happening in the local scene. Like we loved kind of like the local hardcore scene, bands like Adamantium and Death by Stereo and Throwdown. We were also listening to like, Kill Switch and kind of the bands that were coming up at the same time um, from the East Coast. But at the same time, we were super into like, Me First and the Gimme Gimmes and like Saves the Day and bands like that, bands like, Alkaline Trio and Hot Water Music. And then our old singer Alex was kind of one of the first ones that got into like from the group that got into more like kind of metal, like introduced us to more like In Flames and kind of like Soilwork and bands like that. So it kind of came from everywhere. And then, our guitar player Travis was like super into like the Deftones and Morrissey and like weird stuff like that. So it's kind of like it came in from so many different angles. I think that's why we've always sort of had this really eclectic blend of genre when it came down to our sound.
Mm. You talk about the old singers, or the old bandmates, essentially. When you go through those band changes, the lineup changes, how do you find that affects the band? Is it easier to stay on track, or does it take a moment to regather yourselves, etc.?
I think that I don't know. I think that anytime that anything's ever happened with this band, as far as member changes, what we might not fully understand at the time, but I think, well, maybe we do. I think whenever there's change in this band, it's because it's like fully necessary.
Yep.
And that kind of like, have you ever like broken up with a girl, you break up with a significant other that like you weren't supposed to, and it hits you in the chest right away, and you're like, I don't think this was the right decision. Or it's the other thing, and you're like, okay, that was the right thing to do. Like I think anytime we've had any sort of major changes within our band, we've felt it pretty immediately before and after that it was like necessary to continue. So I think we've always kind of like put ourselves in a comfortable place, and like our band tends to really like bond and kind of like strengthen at those sort of difficult periods, you know what I mean? So it's always ends up being sort of good for us,
Yeah,
strangely enough.
yeah, no, I get it. Look, I mean, it's essentially, well, it's almost been another a few years, and it's been 30 years that you guys have been formed for. How do you feel which is unbelievable, right? Um,
It's insane. My brain is going to the 25-year anniversary, which is next year. And I like, and you're the second person that's like skipped to 30, and I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa,
slow it down, slow it down.
yeah.
Um, hey, so how do you feel during that time? Let's go with 25 years. During that time, how do you think your sound has evolved during that period?
I mean, I think that you hear the fact that when we started, we were like, for the most part, like 17, 18-year-old kids. You
Yep.
know what I mean? Like the majority of our band was fresh out of high school, or like fresh in college. You know, and I think you hear that like Suicide Notes to me sounds like an album that was written by a bunch of late teens. You know what I mean? That were like into certain things. And as we've grown and kind of gone on, it's like you learn new things along the way. You work with new people. You broaden your horizons musically within ourselves. You have kind of like bigger and more kind of aggressive aspirations as a band too. Because once you start being in a band and you kind of like you get that first hit of what being in a band is as like a drug, it's like, ooh, and we can do what else? Like from the beginning, it's like we're in a van, like, ooh, bands are in a bus, what's that like? Ooh, bands bring lights on tour, what's that like? You know what I mean? Like, oh, we get to play the theaters instead of the clubs. Oh, we get to play the arenas instead of the theaters. Like as that moves forward, and also like you just keep learning things and kind of getting better at what you do. We're a band that's always tried to chase that. Like we're constantly chasing the dragon of like, how do we do what we do, but just better? Like, how do I make my voice better at all times? How do I find new ways to kind of like things to do with my voice? How to like the guys get better at doing guitar solos? Like it's always like this ever never ending sort of quest. And I think you can hear that as you grow with us. I think a lot of our fans have grown with us too. That's why I think we've been really like fortunate to keep sort of longevity and kind of keep like a relatively kind of like current thing, because a lot of our fan base just keeps growing up with us. You know what I mean? So it's like they started listening to us when they were 17 also, and we were all kids with the same emotions and the same like kind of outlook. And then we sort of all grow up together. And like I think that's why people are continuously kind of growing with the changes we make and the kind of left turns that we take as a band, which is kind of cool.
Now, these days, I mean, people are lucky and privileged to be able to open and support you guys as a band. Back in the earlier days, you guys were, supporting and opening for some of your local, not local, your personal heroes. People that you guys looked up to. How was it back then, working with, some of the greats in the industry back then?
It is awesome. These are really awesome questions, by the way. Very like different perspective than usual. I appreciate it. But it was very cool. I mean, we were really lucky enough to kind of like we kept touring with bands that when early on that we were like, wait, why us? Like, why are we doing that? Like one of our first kind of big tours was with Snapcase and Boy Sets Fire, two bands that we like we looked up to, we listened to, and we're like, wait, and it made sense. You know what I mean? We're kind of in neighboring genres. It kind of makes sense together. They were like almost like our elders in a sense. Where that was one of the first tours where it was like our elders like sort of passing a torch a little bit, because it was like they were in their late 30s, early 40s, kind of like winding down a little bit on touring. We were like these new kids. You know what I mean? So it was like that was a cool thing. But then we would go on tour with bands like CKY, or like there was one year where we did Ozfest and we did Warp Tour, and then we did tours with Lamb of God, but also Taking Back Sunday and The Used. So it was like we are bouncing around to all these kind of bands that at the very beginning I would have never even like put us with. You know what I mean? I would have never thought we would have done a Taking Back Sunday tour, but it was cool. I mean, it was really awesome to kind of be able to kind of observe so many of these like heavy hitters in their prime. Like we toured with Lamb of God multiple times on their like ascension, like before they were fucking Lamb of God that everyone knows now. and it was cool to like watch that organic growth. Like we toured with Taking Back Sunday, like in their fucking prime, the Used in their prime. Like we were like on like the In Love and Death cycle. So it was like, no, it was the second record cycle. It was like it was one of those things where it was like we got to witness like fucking magic, you know, for a lot of these bands to kind of be there firsthand, and it was cool to like to witness that and kind of learn from all these different bands and see what all these different bands do and how they operate and what they do to get a crowd moving, you know, like it was like constant like school for us.
Yeah. Um, hey, look, the musical industry, the music industry, you know, the landscape of, you know, this job that you do has changed dramatically since 1998, you know, ridiculously. I mean, I guess the music industry has always been, you know, a hard slog. You know, it's never just been given to anyone on a silver platter. But
No.
I do think it's a lot harder these days, obviously, because of, you know, the way you need to make the money, you know. It's not through people
Yeah.
going out buying the CDs anymore.
No.
What advice would you give to somebody starting off their career these days, you know, who find it tough? What would you say to them?
I think that you have to be aware of sort of what you have to be aware of your surroundings. Like I'll try to compare two sort of eras of time, right? Um, I'm a 40-year-old man that is on the internet and is very active on social media. Like I'm on Instagram, I look at TikTok all the time. Am I interested in like doing every TikTok trend while, you know what I mean, like to try and like gain a following? Not really, but am I aware that that is a very important piece of our fabric right now as an entertainer? Yeah. So you have to do that. It's like I compare it to like back in the day, like when like the way you got people to your shows was you went to other shows and flyered, right? Like,
Yeah,
hey, we're playing with, oh, do you like this band? We're playing with them next month at whatever. I didn't like doing that, but it was a necessary part of the fabric of what made your thing work. So it's like I think that if you're just kind of getting into music, like understanding the importance of all of the little elements that come with this. Like, gone are the days for the most part where you just have a great song and that's all that it was. You know what I mean? It's like pretty rare that it's like, oh, I had this great song, you know, record label exec found it, and now I'm a big artist. It's like, nah, that doesn't work. It's like you had big song, you gained some local fans, maybe you got some popularity on the internet that helped you get into touring, you know, like so just be aware of your surroundings and kind of the necessities that go along with being in a band because you don't just have to be a good band anymore. You have to be so much more, unfortunately, than just a good band, you know?
yep, totally. But you know what, Brandon? No one's job is easy. It doesn't matter what career you work
No,
in, you got to work for it.
no. You have to fucking go for it. And I mean, I've had this conversation with people too. It's like, I mean, even us, like we're a very, I'd like to think we're a very established band. We've accomplished things that like I never dreamed of. But the reality is there's so much ground we haven't covered and so much further we collectively want to go. And it's like, oh, like people will be like, oh, you know, you don't have to do that. You're fucking in Atreyu. I'm like, yeah, I'm in Atreyu. I want Atreyu to be something vastly different when the day is done. You know what I'm saying? Like, I
Uh-huh.
don't want my legacy to be where I'm at now. Like, I got work to do still, you know? And it's like, you have to really understand the depth of what, like you said, any work is hard. To be successful at literally anything takes a lot,
Yeah.
especially this insane industry that we've decided to be a part of.
Yeah. You are such a freaking joy to interview and chat with, like seriously. Based off that
Thank you.
response you just gave me then, a question for you is, you know, I mean, you've done some amazing kick-ass stuff over the course of these, you know, almost 25 years. What's something,
Thank you.
and there must be a plethora, but what's something you're really, really freaking proud of as an individual that you've experienced during this time?
Um, I think that we've been. I, I don't know. That list is very long. I'm gonna go with something that's really current.
Yep.
That just happened to us. That was like a little bit of badge of honor for me. So about 15 years ago, we played a couple shows with Iron Maiden in
Yeah.
Mexico, in Mexico, and we were like, holy shit! And you hear the horror stories of that, and like, you know, it's a gnarly thing, and it was aggressive.
Yeah.
Like it was Iron Maiden, a bunch of legendary death metal bands, and Atreyu. And we were playing over all the death metal bands. It was like very like almost we were supposed to be there, but we weren't. And we had never really been to Mexico before. And like we were able to tip out the loaders with the change that people threw on stage while we were playing. Like our bass player got hit in the face with like a railroad spike and almost like took his eye out. It was like very gnarly, like a sort of scary situation. But after the show, like members of Iron Maiden were like, "Hey, great show. First of all, you finished." So most bands don't even get to say that. And they're like, second of all, like we wanted you here. So just know that like you're here because we chose you to be here. So don't be intimidated by our fans. They can be a little aggressive. But still, we're just like, damn, okay, we got through it. 2 shows with Iron Maiden. Let's like not check that one off the list, right? So then we get another offer just about a couple months ago to do 3 more shows with Iron Maiden in Canada. And at first, like the money's right and it's arenas, and you're like, okay, like this seems cool, but like shit, do we do this again? Like, do we put ourselves through that? And I was like, please, this has to be our like this is like our like redemption, you know? This is our chance to go back and like be a better band and like see if we can hold our own better than we did 15 years ago. So I hand it to one bit that Canadians are just nice, like inherently very, very nice. But 2, I think we're just a better band, a more entertaining band. I think we sound better live. But we went and did these shows with Iron Maiden, and it was like polar opposite. Like it was incredible. So that was like the most recent, like, okay, good. Like we're still here this many years later. We went back to do the same thing and kind of like conquered what we did last time. It was good.
It's kind of
That's my most recent proud moment.
it's the show that you kind of had to do.
Exactly. Yeah, you have to go back and like it's like unfinished business, you know. The
Hey,
best part about the Mexico version of that shows was that the backdrop pole was too small, which you'd think wouldn't be the case in a stadium Iron Maiden show. These are stadium shows the first time. So our backdrop just said Trey because
oh,
the A and the U were folded backwards. So we played a stadium to a bunch of people, and it looked like our band name was Trey.
yeah,
Also
no,
fun.
Devo. Hey, I don't know if this is an urban legend. I've never actually heard you guys personally say this, but who was the fan? Because obviously the band name is named after a character I've heard of A Never-Ending Story, iconic movie. I
Yeah.
love it. Who was the big fan of the movie, and who came up with that name, to call the band?
So we sat in a room with a kid named Scott Lloyd, who is a friend of all of ours. We grew up with him, went to high school with him. He toured with us for years, and we were looking for a band name. And at the time, we were really into this band called Shai Hulud, and they got their name from Dune, the movie Dune. But we were like, what if we do like kind of like a sci-fi thing? Like sci-fi band names are kind of cool, like, and it'll be something out of the box. And I don't know if we were watching the Neverending Story or if it was just like he thought about it and he was like, that movie's cool. Like, what about Falcor? And we were like, no, that's too like I don't think that's it. And he was like, what about he made a joke like, what about Rockbiter? And I was like, no, because it's another character from that movie. And we're like, no. And he's like, well, what about Atreyu? And it was as simple as that, where it was like, Atreyu, like kind of rolls off the tongue. Like, yeah, that makes sense. And it wasn't like we didn't even think about it that much, I don't think. And like after the fact, our guitar player Dan has come up with this kind of great reason and relation as to why the name makes sense with our band and all this stuff. But back then it was just like, yeah, that sounds cool.
And it
But
fitted.
for sure, I think it set us apart because it wasn't like we grew up in the era of like 1,000 deadly tears and like like another day upon us. Like it was like every band had this like very like serious sounding, you know what I mean, like kind of name. So it set us apart a little bit, I think.
Yeah, I think so. It's a very approachable name, obviously, something that people connect with really quite easily, I think, which is good. And it's worked for you. Look at you now.
It's worked, yeah. I will say I think we as a band have the most misspelled name on marquees of anyone that's ever toured the world. It's fantastic. It's
And
fantastic.
pronounced wrong as well.
But I find that that's so super regional. Like depending on where you're from, it's Akreyu or Akreyu, or it's like it depending on where you're from. The funnier thing is too how people chant it.
Okay.
Like you'd think it's a 3-part Akreyu, like syllables, but we've had like Akreyu, Akreyu, Akreyu. Like we've had like very different chants where like I don't know where you came up with that, but I'll take it.
I mean, you know what? That's the blessings of being able to travel the world, hearing all of that
Absolutely.
in all
Absolutely.
context. Hey, let's fast forward right up to now. Your most recent album, which came out towards the end of last year, which was called A Torch in the Dark. That is obviously inspired, your love of wanting to tour, but that has also inspired the tour that you're doing. That, like I said, is coming Sunday, 18th of February to Adelaide and then the rest of Australia as well. How much of that new album are we going to be hearing on the tour? And what can we expect from the tour in general?
We've luckily it's funny because it's like I like to think that Australia is kind of winding down to the last little chunk of this sort of world tour that we've done. And we've really gotten to kind of test out a lot of the new songs and test out the set and kind of really craft the set. So I like to think that Australia is kind of getting the best version of the Akreyu set that it's happening right now. But it's really cool. It's like it's a really good mix of everything. If you're a fan of The Curse and all you want to hear is Right Side of the Bed and you don't give a shit about the new songs, there's some stuff in there for you. If you just found us from our new album and you're going backwards, you're not really familiar, like there's some stuff there for you as well. So there's really like pieces of almost every album. But as far as the new songs, we sort of picked, I guess, what the world and what analytics showed us are the most popular ones. But what we did also is what we've been doing is we'll put a bunch of the other new songs that aren't mainstays in the set and literally put them in like a cup or a hat and pick someone out of the crowd in the front row to like, eyes closed, pick a song out. So we'll get like one extra song out of the set that's a new song and we don't know what it's going to be until that person in the front row picks it. So it's fun and like interactive. But I think that if you've been a fan of our band anywhere in the timeline, like this is a great set to go to. It really covers a lot of ground.
I'm super excited to get you here. I can't wait. It's going to be an incredible show. And I love live shows at the Lion Arts Factory, which is where you're going to be playing here.
Absolutely.
Banger of a venue. Brandon, thank you so much for your time. I cannot wait to catch up with you when you hit town. Hopefully we've got really nice weather. And yeah, have an incredible tour and I'll see you.
Absolutely.
Brandon,
appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
thank you.